Welcome to Comcast Cable Channel 977. I'm Elizabeth Pelicane. I'm the Journalism Advisor at Fluvanna County High School. And I want to welcome you to today's edition of This Week at the Lake. We're broadcasting from the Hi and Muriel Badler studio at the Lake Monticello Clubhouse. And our guest today is Dan Schutte. He's the anchor at the Newsplex in Charlottesville. He is also a Lake Monticello resident. So, Dan, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
Tell us about the Newsplex. I would imagine that there's some people who don't quite understand that it's more than one station.
Yeah, it's a little different. It's one of the recent trends in television as far as there are several affiliates running out of the same building. We have a Fox affiliate, an ABC affiliate, a CBS affiliate, and then a 24-hour news and weather channel, and My Seville, which is cable channel 2, and it runs a lot of reruns and awesome old movies, stuff like that. But one of the reasons behind it is Gray Television, who's our parent company, started this model a few years ago in that TV stations are so equipment intensive that with digital technology now, you can actually run multiple stations with only having to buy one set of equipment. Okay. So you've got revenue from multiple stations, but you've only got one set of equipment to make it all happen.
Okay, so you're kind of achieving economies of scale by doing one thing and achieving many ends. Okay.
Right.
Tell us about your average day. Take us through your day. What time do you start? What time does it end?
Sure. Well, my set hours are 3 till about 11:45, 3 p.m. to about 11:45 p.m. However, usually I'm on my phone answering emails, texts, that kind of thing, usually throughout the day. I mean, already today I've had to do a couple different things, and I'm working on setting up some stories for next week. So you're never really as unplugged as you maybe like to be, but usually I get in at about 3 o'clock. I do a radio update, which airs on several radio stations throughout the area. Then I talk with reporters about what they're doing for the upcoming newscasts. Then I talk with the producer about what order our stories need to go in the newscasts, and then I start writing a lot of things.
Okay. So as the lead anchor, are you deciding which stories are going to be covered and the order in which they go?
It's a team effort. The producer usually makes those decisions, and then we just go over it. I've been around a little longer than some of the folks at the Newsplex, so we all kind of bounce ideas off of each other, and it's, you know, having lived here since 2006, you get a better handle of what really gets people fired up and what people care about. I mean, that's a big part of knowing your local community. So that's a team effort.
Okay. So you're writing most of the stories yourself?
Reporters write their stories. Reporters when they go out in the field, but then when we get information off the wires or off the feeds from our networks, we all write a lot of that and rewrite it, because a lot of times you get something from the AP wire and that just doesn't work on television. It's good reading, but it's terrible television, so we have to rewrite it to work for broadcast.
Okay. Let me check my notes, see if I've got this straight. So you're anchoring the CBS 19 News at 6, although you told me tonight you're going to do 5 also.
Yeah, this week I'm filling in. Rachel Ryan's down in Greensboro covering the Who's for us, so I'll pick up some extra shows there, and she'll do a great job.
Okay. So you're doing 5, then you'll do the 6, then you're doing the Wahoo Fox 27 News at 10,
Correct.
And then you're back to CBS 19 at 11.
Yep.
Wow, how do you juggle all of that?
Well, it's a lot. You know, my first station, I remember I only did one newscast a day, and now I don't even know what I would do with all my time if that's all I did. We do, the reason we do it on Fox is because their programming is different. Fox primetime ends at 10. And we find that a lot of people like an earlier newscast. If you have to get up early, well, sometimes 11 o'clock can be pretty late. So it's another set of viewers that we have a chance to reach. And there is a lot of carryover between the shows. We do things a little differently. We get different network content from the different network providers. We get Fox content for the Fox broadcast, and we get CBS content for the CBS broadcast, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's a lot of work. I'm usually pretty busy when I'm at the office.
And then you're in bed by
12:31.
Okay.
Last night it was closer to 2, but it just it depends. I mean, I can't just come home and just go to bed right away. So I usually read at night because I'm kind of TV'd out by the time I get home. Yeah. My eyes are tired, too much monitor time.
I'm sure.
So I read a lot of books.
Okay. And then as you're switching from one program to the other, this is CBS and now we're switching to Fox, do they basically just kind of change the background behind you?
They changed the background. Recently we've consolidated our graphics looks and all that kind of thing, so most of that is the same, but we just changed a little bit about the set and a little bit about the format. And at 6 I co-anchor with Rachel Ryan, and same with the 11 o'clock, but at the Fox, the 10 o'clock hour, it's just me and then Damon Dillman and David Reese, our meteorologist.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so I mean there's different things in each show, there's different stories in each show, and the big thing is just the time frame, because you know a lot of families have to get up and have to get the kids ready to go to school and get things done, and 11:30 is a little late, so we find that the Fox works pretty well there.
Okay. Well, let's switch gears. Tell us how you got to be where you are today. What kind of started the ball rolling towards broadcast journalism?
I am not one of those people that always wanted to be on TV. Not at all, actually. I took a public speaking class my junior year of high school, and I thought, well, it's pretty easy. I wonder how I can make a living doing this. I kind of like doing this. And my teacher said, well, have you ever thought about journalism? You like to tell stories. You could do broadcast journalism. All right. So then I looked around, and I went to college for that and got my degree in broadcast journalism. And so after I got my degree, I got my first job in Eureka, California, which is 300 miles north of San Francisco, but still 100 miles south of Oregon. But it's right on the Redwood Coast.
Pretty, I'm sure.
It's real pretty. 62 and cloudy all the time. Gets a little old.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's 58 in the winter and 62 in the summer.
Right.
That gets a little old, but a lot of interesting stories out there as far as, did you hear about the girl that lived in a tree for 2 years?
No.
Yeah, that was there.
Okay.
I was actually the first person to interview her when she got to the ground, which is pretty interesting.
Why was she in a tree for 2 years?
She didn't want anybody to cut it down.
Oh, it's sounding familiar now.
Yeah,
Okay.
Julia Butterfly Hill was her name.
Okay.
She was in Cosmo and all these other big national publications, and she finally decided to come down because they reached a deal with Pacific Lumber Company, which is who owned all the timber, and it was an old, Luna was the name of the tree, and it was an old growth redwood tree that's, well, the base of it is bigger than the area that we're sitting in now.
Okay.
And then, so she came down and they got a deal and all that kind of thing, but I was 22 years old when that happened. That was pretty interesting. And I also covered a full-scale prison riot at the worst prison in California when I'd been on the job about 3 weeks. So that was
Frightening.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, well, what happened was it was media day. So we're on a tour, and there's this area right outside the exercise yard where there's the exercise yard, there's a chain link fence, there's a gap, and then there's the big concrete wall. We're all in the concrete, between the concrete wall and the chain link fence wall, and all of a sudden at the end of the exercise, all these inmates just start fighting. And there's tear gas flying everywhere, and there are officers running in, and we can't run out because all the officers are running in, so we're pressed up against this concrete wall. There's tear gas going everywhere. And I've been on the job about 3 weeks, thinking, oh,
I'm gonna die.
okay, this is pretty exciting. All right, I mean, that's a pretty big wall. There's a lot of guards. We'll be okay. But yeah, and then I spent the night on a crab boat, and I went out on a Coast Guard. I wasn't anchoring then; I was reporting. So I did a lot more field stuff, and I had a lot of good opportunities there. And after that, I got a job in Duluth, Minnesota, and I reported there for about 6 months, and then I became an anchor. And after Duluth, I covered all kinds of crazy stuff in Duluth too. And one night it was so cold, we had to sit on top of the satellite truck with a heat gun because the hydraulic lines that open up the satellite dish, they froze because it was so low below zero. So the truck guy and I took turns sitting on top with a heat gun to thaw out the lines so we could open the dish. That was fun. But then, yeah, I got a job here at the Newsplex, originally doing the 6 and 11, and now I do the 6, 10, and 11.
And how does this compare to Minnesota? Big improvement for you, or do you miss some things about Minnesota?
I know this is a little weird, but I actually like Minnesota winter better. And the reason is because if it's going to be cold, we might as well be able to ice skate. We might as well be able to snowmobile. We might as well play hockey. Here it just gets cold.
Right.
It's not quite warm enough to play golf. It's not quite warm enough to water ski.
Don't step on the lake.
Yeah, exactly. The ice is never thick enough to
Right,
do anything.
right.
4 inches is what you need, by the way, to walk on it.
Okay.
And so I don't know, but I do like the fact that spring is really starting here in Virginia now. That's great. And then fall goes until mid-November.
Yes.
So I like that a lot.
Yes.
So there's pluses and minuses.
And you've been here in Charlottesville how long?
2006.
Okay.
I moved here in June of 2006.
And you've been living at the lake the whole
The
time?
whole
too?
time, same
Okay.
house.
All right.
Yeah.
Very good.
I like it, and I play golf at the golf course here. I usually water ski 3-4 mornings a week with some friends.
Nice.
Yeah, my first weekend after moving in, I basically went down to the marina with my ski and said, all right, I need to make some friends. And I did.
Very good.
So now, yeah, we ski quite a bit.
And you were telling me earlier you're married.
I got married in October to a local girl.
Okay. And
Yeah.
she is a nanny,
Yeah.
you said.
Yep. She's working for a family in Ivy, and the hours are a little tricky. She works normal people hours, and I work from 3 to midnight, so that gets a little tricky. We have to see each other a lot on the weekend.
All right. Very good. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talking about news coverage.
Okay.
What changes for you at the Newsplex when a story goes national? For example, with the Hanagram case. Does anything change, or do you pretty much report on it the same way?
Well, we report on it the same way, but what really changes is the logistics of doing it. Because when it's just the local folks, it's a lot less hectic, for lack of a better word. I mean, whenever the police chief holds a press conference, there'll be, 6, 8, 10 people if it's just the locals. But when the national folks come to town, then it's a whole swarm of people, and then everybody's fighting for all kinds of information and nuggets, and a lot more rumor gets flying around, and there's a lot more pressure to be first, and it's hard not to succumb to that pressure because you want to be right. I mean, and there's, how many times did you hear false things coming out about the Hanagram investigation or the Rolling Stone, or, I mean, the article itself in that case, but it's just, there's a lot of pressure.
Everybody's trying to get the scoop.
Everybody's trying to be first, and especially when the national people are in town, there's a lot more pressure, but we try and pride ourselves on being right, because at the end of the day, that's what counts.
Well, also, they'll leave.
Yeah.
And you're still
and
here.
though that's the other part about it too, is that we still have to live here. And I wouldn't want to do it anyway, just because of the it's not the right thing to do. But yeah, I see the police chief at the gym all the time. I see the sheriff at the gym all the time.
Right.
A lot of the officers live here at the lake. We're not in the business of burning bridges.
Absolutely.
and you're right, we have to live here, and that makes it a big difference.
Yeah. So in terms of stories which have gone national in the last few years, obviously Hanagram you've worked on. What are some of the other big stories that you've worked on?
There's been a lot here. Hanagram, Rolling Stone, Morgan Harrington. I mean, President Obama bringing the president of France to Monticello was a pretty big deal. President Obama had a couple of campaign stops here. That was a pretty interesting deal. I think this pipeline Dominion's trying to build, I don't think that one's going to go national, but that one's going to be a pretty big deal.
Yes, it is.
When the derecho blew through here in June, that was pretty big.
It was.
Teresa Sullivan, when she was ousted and then reinstated, that was a pretty big deal. And a circus, by the way, that was pretty interesting. I was actually out of town when she got reinstated, and the place where I do radio hits for called me and said, "Hey, can you do a live hit on the radio?" I said, "Nope, why not?" I was literally knee deep in Lake Superior.
Oh.
It was summertime. I was on a vacation.
Sure,
I mean, it happens.
My goodness.
Yeah, but we've had a lot of stories that have gone national in the time that I've been here. It's pretty interesting. The snowstorm in 2009, we got the most snow out of anybody. Like we were the record holder. Yay!
Makes life exciting.
Yeah.
Let's talk about broadcasts versus other types of media.
Okay.
So in a 30-minute broadcast, I know you do an hour long, but like a 30-minute broadcast is actually 22 minutes of news on average, 8 minutes of commercials.
Yep.
So I guess an hour-long broadcast would probably be about 45 minutes, 15 minutes of commercials.
Yeah, about,
roughly.
yeah.
Okay. So you're updating the world, basically, the Charlottesville world, on what's the news for the day, and because of that, you can touch on things, but you can't go into depth about
very
things.
true.
So, what would you say? That's a negative, but what would be some of the positives, some of the strengths of broadcast journalism?
One of the reasons I became an anchor instead of a reporter was because I wanted to know what was going on as a whole. When I was a reporter in California, I covered the Coast Guard and the logging industry, and a county to the north called Del Norte County, and I could tell you anything and everything going on there, but I couldn't tell you what was happening across the street. Because you get so involved in what you're covering that you kind of miss the bigger picture sometimes. Right. So I really like that in a half an hour broadcast, I can give you the fundamental points of what you need to know to go about your daily life. And then one of the things that's really helping us is the internet, because we can do an entire interview and I can show you sound bites of if I sat down with Governor McAuliffe, said, hey, here's 3 comments from the governor in a minute and a half story. But if you want to see the whole interview, go check out our website. So that's really kind of helping TV be able to fill both of those needs.
Right.
Because I'd love to pretend that everybody sits at home on the couch and watches me just, attentively. They're fixed in, they're locked in. But I know, especially at 6 o'clock, you're cooking dinner, the kids are getting their homework done, or at least they better be. People are coming. There's a lot of things going on, so a lot of times it's on in the background.
Right.
So that presents a challenge in writing, in that you have to know what your audience is doing,
and hopefully grab their attention from all the other many things that they're doing as they're multitasking.
And Twitter's open on their iPhone, or they're doing this, or they're emailing somebody from their. It just, there's always a lot going on now.
Okay, so on a related note, I was looking at some statistics online, and apparently since 1985, there's been a big decline in the number of people aged 30 and under who actually seek out the news every day. And it's, I believe, approximately 50% of individuals under age 30 say they never watch the news. And I know, I teach journalism at the high school. And I talk to my students, and how many of you read the news? Hardly anybody reads a newspaper anymore. That in the younger generation, and how many of you actually look at the news or seek the news every day? And it's a lot of them don't. They're just not interested, or for them, news is what they saw on Twitter. So how do you stay relevant in a time like that? It's
a challenge. I'll tell you, it is really difficult. The thing is, and I think the job security for me, frankly, is that whenever something happens, because our station just actually did a bunch of research, our national company, Gray TV, just did a bunch of research. People see something on Twitter, and then they turn on TV to know what happened. So TV is one of those things that the day-to-day habit isn't there, but then whenever there's a snowstorm, our ratings go through the roof. Whenever there's big news, people turn to it. So the challenge is to get everybody there day to day. And that's really a tough thing to do because there's so much competition. So we try and have our Twitter feed and our Facebook page and our website and our mobile app and all that stuff, and we try and drive that to our TV station and our local news coverage. Like
little teaser tweets. Check out this story online, or
exactly.
The 5 o'clock news tonight. We're going to be talking about, fill in the blank.
There, on Twitter, you can say, "There's a storm coming. It hits tonight." So now you know what you need to know.
Right.
But if you want to know a little bit more about it, hey, the show starts in 10 minutes.
Okay. So you think that by taking advantage of social media, that the broadcast industry will be able to continue to keep even the young generation watching in the future?
I hope so. I mean, and frankly, it's important. I mean, there are a lot of decisions that are going to be happening, and I remember a story once. One of our young reporters had to go cover an Albemarle County property tax hearing, and they were talking about raising taxes, and she said, "What do I care about if my taxes go up or not? I rent a house." I said, "Really? Your landlord must be the nicest guy that I know, because if his taxes go up, you don't think he's going to pass any of that rent on to you?"
Very true.
I mean, and I don't want to start a taxes up or down argument, but the point is that sort of thing affects everybody.
Yes, it does.
So you just, whether you want to know it or not, you have to know about it because it matters, one way or the other.
It does. Very true. Let's talk about another challenge facing journalism, the question of whether or not people trust the media. Certainly things have happened recently. I'm kind of thinking of the Brian Williams situation.
Brian Williams, Rolling Stone.
Yes, Rolling Stone.
I mean, and that's in our own
perfect
backyard.
Example. Absolutely. A statistic I pulled out, it was a Gallup poll from last September. Americans' confidence in the media's ability to report the news fully, accurately, and fairly is at an all-time low of 40%. Apparently it was 40%, bounced up, it's back at 40% again. And it's certainly things like the Brian Williams case incident haven't
Geraldo
exactly
Rivera's
helped.
got his own. I mean,
Correct.
sadly, we can't name just one.
That's very true. So how do you deal with that?
I try, that's one of the reasons I like to stay local. I try and keep in mind what we were talking about earlier, is that these are my friends and these are my neighbors and these are the people that I see at the grocery store. So if I say, the sky is falling and then it doesn't, I'm going to get called on that. And I'm going to get called on it probably more than once, which is great. I like it. I think it holds people accountable, and I think it's important. When I moderated a debate between Robert Hurt and Tom Perriello a few years ago, we got several calls into the TV station, 4 of which said I was too easy on Tom Perriello, and 4 of them said I was too easy on Robert Hurt, and it was the same debate.
Right.
So I figure that's pretty much doing it right. To a certain extent, people are going to see and hear what they want to see, and our job is to be able to look back at our work, review scripts or something like that, and say, okay, this is all true, this is all accurate, we're doing the best we can. And hopefully people come to trust us.
Very true. Thinking again about, you kind of touched on it, whether or not you're providing balanced coverage. I know when I ask my students, can you think of like media that's not balanced? They obviously immediately say Fox. And to which I would respond, well, you can see bias in pretty much, I'm talking national, that's more reporting on politics. You can see bias in any newscast, particularly if you bring your own bias into it, like you were saying. People are going to say you're being unfair. It must be very, very difficult to not inject any of your own biases into your reporting.
It's so hard sometimes because you just have to you just can't do it. I mean, it's every once in a while I'll throw something out, but it won't be political. It would just be kind of a Captain Obvious observation, I guess you could say, something like that. Those llamas running around Arizona, that's pretty funny. That's okay. But yeah, as far as if what the president is doing is right or wrong, or what the mayor is doing is right or wrong, that's not my job. My job is to tell you side 1, side 2. That's your decision.
Decide,
yep, you go ahead and you make up your own mind.
Right.
Don't kill the messenger.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And that's tough. That's tough.
It's very challenging.
People are, as I said, they have their own biases, and so even if you aren't showing it, they may be injecting it into, assuming that that's what you meant by the way you said something, and you maybe had no intention of saying that.
People will call the station and why are you putting the president on the air saying this or that? Well, it's because he's the president. Why are you putting the governor on the air?
Sure.
It's because he's the governor.
Right.
And our job is, a little bit bigger picture as far as a democracy is concerned, we need to put the president on the air so then people at home know this is what's happening, and in theory that affects their decisions in November. And
very true. They should know what's going on.
Yeah, in theory that's how it's supposed to work anyway, but voter turnout numbers don't really suggest that's been going on as well as it maybe should.
That is true.
And that's an opinion I can share, that's actually voter turnout numbers are really low and they need to get better.
Particularly in local elections.
Absolutely.
I don't know exactly do you have some figures?
Not off the top of my head, but they're pretty low. There's a Charlottesville City Council primary coming up, and I want to say it's around 20% was the last time that they had an off-year election, that kind of thing. And honestly, local government is probably the government that impacts your life the most.
Yes.
Because here in Fluvanna County, the Board of Supervisors decides how much funding our police department gets. They decide who does our road work, how much our road work costs. They decide on development projects at Zion Crossroad and whether or not we're going to bring water up
water,
there and what that
absolutely.
means, and then that affects your tax rate, which affects your family budget, which affects your property value, it affects your education system. I mean, local government sadly gets the least amount of turnout and probably has some of the biggest impact on what happens.
What local stories for Fluvanna, since we're in Fluvanna, are you guys kind of focusing on these days? Certainly the water issue.
The water issue is
Okay.
a big one, and that a state corporation commission meeting with Aqua Virginia, that is a big one. Not only because water rates are a huge issue out here, but also because the state corporation commission doesn't do that. They don't go on the road and host meetings in other places, and they're doing that here in Fluvanna. And
Why do you
that's
think that is?
I think, frankly, because the response has been so big. I think because they realize that if this many people are writing in worried about this problem, logistically speaking, I don't think we can host a meeting in, say, Richmond or even Northern Virginia, but it'd be in Richmond. We won't be able to get the turnout that we need just because, let's be honest, what family can go ahead and provide daycare for the kids so they can drive to Richmond all day for a 3 or 4 hour meeting?
Leave their job and
The
all their
jobs and all that kind of
responsibilities.
stuff. I mean,
Yes.
it's challenging, and at the same time, that's the challenge of local government too. I know there wasn't a very big crowd at the Fluvanna County Board of Supervisors meeting this week. It was a long meeting. I mean, it's
And they're
a
voting
challenge.
about, yeah, very
and,
important
and,
things.
and then they're talking budget and they're talking
Right.
tax rate, and they've set an advertised rate, and they're trying to set the permanent rate. So I mean, it's a very challenging line.
Why do you, who knows, but why do you think that is, that fewer people are kind of into the Fluvanna tax issue right now than there were a few years ago? It was huge.
Yeah, a few years ago it was huge. I think partly because the economy's better. People aren't quite as checking their pocketbooks as much. That's more of a guess. But I think another part of it is people are just busy. Mom and dad are both working. The kids are in school. They've got all this kind of stuff going on. It is.
You come home, you're
You
tired.
come home,
I
you're
don't wanna
cooking
go to a
dinner.
meeting.
I got to
Yeah.
do this. Yeah, I got to do that. I got to do this. Oh, that's right. There was that meeting this week. I mean, it is a challenge. Engagement is, but democracy isn't easy, I guess.
That's very true. Yeah. Getting back to the opinion in journalism, and also maybe people that you would look up to in journalism. Tim Russert, do you remember the late Tim Russert?
Absolutely.
Political news reporter, and I just really enjoyed him. I'd have to say he was my favorite journalist that I really looked up to, because he would be there and asking tough questions of everybody, regardless of what side of the political spectrum they were on, and I never had any idea where he personally felt. He was tough on everybody, and nice about it too. You know, I could just say, this is someone I'd love to go out to dinner with and just have a great time.
Yeah.
So is there anyone that
I was
you
a
really
big,
look up to?
I was a big Brokaw guy.
Okay.
I'm from Minneapolis. Brokaw is from South Dakota. My dad's from South Dakota. He's from Mitchell, South Dakota, actually. Tom Brokaw's first job, his news director said, "I'm sorry, honey, I just don't think you're cut out for this business."
Really?
And that was in a small town in South Dakota. So I guess it shows that you can persevere. Journalism is very fickle in that in TV, it's all about being in the right place at the right time and finding the right people that want to take a chance on you and that kind of thing. But I liked Brokaw because I thought he was very even, and I thought he asked tough questions. I liked Peter Jennings too.
Yes.
I used to work at an ABC affiliate, and I really liked the way Peter Jennings did his job as well. Peter Jennings once did a story about the obesity problem in America. This was probably 2002 or 2003, and he tied it all together to movie popcorn. And it was all tied together as far as farm subsidies, corn subsidies, the way the government labels. The government recently decided that tomato sauce for pizza is still a vegetable, which sounds ludicrous, but the reason behind it is because then companies can, school lunches have to have a certain amount of fruits and vegetables and all this and that, and so by doing that, it changes the way that foods are made and sold, most importantly. And Peter Jennings tied that all into movie popcorn. And it was just fascinating storytelling. It was so good. It was great. He stopped by Minnesota once and did an interview, much like we're doing actually, with our main anchor, and the whole thing was just, it was fascinating. I could watch Peter Jennings all the time.
He was so smooth.
So
His
smooth,
delivery
yeah.
was so smooth.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not a lot of people know he was Canadian, actually.
Really?
He wasn't even born in America, but America trusted him for a long time.
They did, absolutely. Switching gears to kind of more fun things.
Sure.
I noticed online, I found some YouTube videos of segments where it was Make Dan Sweat. So several years ago, there was a series of things where it looked like you would go out and do kind of athletic type things, ballet, fencing. So tell us about that.
Basically, the idea started out, we wanted some of our folks to do weekly franchise pieces. And so I thought, well, I'll just go see what everybody's up to. And I had to come up with the first few ideas myself, and then people were just emailing me or calling all the time saying, hey, come try this, come try this. So I would.
Okay.
And it was pretty exciting. I think we did that for about 2 years. It had a pretty good run.
Which one did you like best?
Ooh, I don't know. Fencing was fun because I'd never done it before.
It's hard.
It's hard, but it was.
I took a fencing my freshman year in college, thinking of all the swashbuckling movies I had seen growing up. It looks so fun,
looks so fun.
Easy to do.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's so hard.
It's very challenging, and it's a lot more strategic than you think.
Yes.
You thought it was such an athletic endeavor because you're watching the movies and they're running around and jumping on all this stuff, but you can't move very far. Fencing, you're on that little track and you've got about 3 steps forward or back and no side to side, and that one was really, I liked that one a lot. That one was pretty fun. I also did a series called Virginia Adventures, where it was basically what can you do on a tank of gas in Virginia, and that was pretty fun. And they have a zip line up in Luray, and that was pretty fun. The Luray Caverns, there's a big long zip line.
Sure.
And that was pretty exciting.
What were some of the other things you did covering one tank of gas?
One tank of we went to King's Dominion once. That was pretty fun. We went whitewater rafting down on the James, and that was pretty neat too. I really enjoyed that because the company based out of Lynchburg, the guy actually kind of does a little bit of a history tour too. I love that. So he'll say, he was telling you the stories of the guys running the bateaux and the boats and how, you could be a freed slave and you still could have been highly revered on the river, because even way back in those days, you could run a load up the river, nobody cared, what color you were, because it was so important. And that kind of storytelling to me is fascinating. I love it.
Do you get many opportunities to do things like that these days? Or is it more kind of straight news that you're focusing on?
Now that I'm on the anchor desk, I do more straight news, but I do a monthly feature, Wine Wednesday, about the wine industry locally, which runs about $800 million a year into the Virginia economy. So it's a pretty big deal, but we get to do a little more storytelling and set the stories up in advance and do that, and I like to do that.
You actually get to go to the wineries.
Yeah, go to the wineries and you usually have to do it before work, so I don't sample too much. But it's fun though, because it's learning. I mean, I learned a lot just last week. We did something about if the cold in February is going to be bad news for all the crops. Again, at $800 million, we lose all our wine crop. That's a big deal.
That's a big news story.
Yeah, but I learned about really has to get pretty far below zero to hurt our vines, so that's good.
Okay. So what else do you think that people at Lake Monticello need to know about you?
About me?
And about the Newsplex.
About the Newsplex. The Newsplex is very community oriented. We're very local centric. One of the things in TV they judge is market size, as far as how big your city is and how big your reach is and how many people live in the area that can see your signal. And we have one of the smallest geographic areas in the country, because DC is 100 miles to the north, Richmond is 60 miles to the east. We've got stations over the mountain. Our sister station, WHSV, is over the mountain. Lynchburg's 100 miles to the south. So we are really concentrated locally at the Newsplex. We're not worried about what's going on over the mountain. I mean, if it's a huge story, obviously we are, but by and large, we are local-centric, locally focused all the time.
You're here for Charlottesville.
Yeah,
and
that's
the surrounding area.
Yep, and that's about it. Yep, we don't go too far.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, and local sports and local weather, and weather's still the big one. The phrase is always "win with weather," and it's very important to have local meteorologists who just know that, hey, storm systems, when they come down off the mountains, They do different things.
They do.
And if you're at the National Weather Service in DC, you just might not know that. Local knowledge.
Do you think we're done for the winter? I know you're not a meteorologist.
No, I'm not a
Putting you on the spot
meteorologist,
here.
but no, I think we might have one more.
Really?
It's still early in March. I think we might have one more. It snowed literally every March that I've lived here.
Okay.
Although we did have one last weekend.
That's true. Maybe that was it.
I went on vacation to Tampa, so I missed it. But,
Okay.
you know, I think we might have one more cold shot. I don't know if we'll get a ton of snow, but I think we've got one more cold shot in us before we really warm up.
Very good. Well, thank you again for coming today.
Oh, my
Appreciate
pleasure.
your time.
Thanks so
Look
much for
forward-
having me.
Yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you on the news.
No, thank you very much.
So that wraps it up for us today on This Week at the Lake. This program will be starting to air online and on the channel 977 starting tonight, and it'll run March 12th through March 19th. So make sure you catch us then. You can also find this by going to YouTube and just typing in This Week at the Lake, and you'll be able to find this program and other similar programs from the past. So we'll look forward to having you join us next week.